A security guard, who fans have already dubbed the WNBA cop, shouted at her, loudly, publicly, in a moment that was supposed to be all joy and relief and playoff euphoria. The vibe was snatched, choked, and replaced with total awkwardness. All because one of the league's most passionate, outspoken personalities smiled too hard from the sideline. Yeah, that's where we're at now. Let's set the scene. Sophie Cunningham, sidelined due to injury.
If you're here for the real story and not the filtered version, subscribe. And if you're sticking around for the next meltdown, you better definitely subscribe.
Has still been one of the loudest and proudest voices for her team all season long. She's the player who will wave towels, scream encouragement, and talk just enough trash to keep things spicy. She's always been like that. Emotional, unapologetic, real. The kind of player who makes games feel like more than just stats and possessions. The kind of player fans actually remember. But apparently, the league isn't a fan of that energy. Or at least, not when it's coming from her. Because as the Fever secured a huge playoff W, one of the most hyped wins of the season, by the way, Cunningham did what any invested teammate would do. She cheered. She stood up. She clapped. She smiled. And then, from out of nowhere, a security guard came charging in like it was a national emergency. Get back. The words echoed across the arena, like she'd just tried to storm the court with a chainsaw. She hadn't even crossed the line. She hadn't violated protocol. But she got barked at like she'd just broken in a Fort Knox. And that's when the temperature online hit a boiling point. Because fans lost it. Immediately, social media lit up. Clips of the incident spread faster than a leaked halftime playlist. Fans, players, analysts, everyone had the same question. What exactly did Sophie do wrong? And more importantly, why is she being singled out when other players are out here doing the exact same thing? Or more, with zero consequences? Because let's be honest, we've all seen it. Caitlin Clark celebrates, and it's called passion. Angel Reese dances on the sideline, and it's called swagger. Alyssa Thomas throws a shoulder, and it's called grit. But Sophie Cunningham? The second she stands up with a little too much joy, she's being shouted down like a child sneaking into a nightclub. And that's where the conversation turned from awkward moment to league culture problem. Because this wasn't about one guard, or one game, or even one player. This was about patterns, double standards, who gets the benefit of the doubt and who doesn't, who's allowed to be expressive and visible, and who gets told to pipe down the second they break character. And in this moment, Sophie Cunningham became the poster child for the WNBA's messiest issue, inconsistency. Because how do you preach player empowerment, authenticity, and women's voices, and then try to silence someone for being too loud with their joy? It's giving performative. It's giving fragile PR strategy. It's giving, we want personality, just not yours. And Sophie? She handled it like a pro. No meltdown. No viral clapback. Just a small moment of visible confusion, then composure. She sat back down. She let the moment pass. But everyone watching did not. Because we all knew what we were seeing. We were seeing a passionate player get publicly embarrassed by her own league. And if you don't think players are taking notes on that, think again. Because here's the deeper issue. It's not just about who got yelled at. It's about who the league protects and who it polices. Sophie Cunningham is known for being a little brash. She's physical. She talks back. She's loud. She doesn't always play nice. And for some reason, that's never sat quite right with the league brass. Not officially, of course. No one's saying it outright. But moments like this, they scream what silence won't. The same celebration energy that gets marketed when it's coming from league darlings suddenly becomes a problem when it comes from someone who doesn't fit the mold. Someone who doesn't always play into the league's preferred image. Someone who doesn't apologize for having attitude. It's not just a Sophie thing. It's a culture thing. And fans are starting to notice. Because let's be real, the league's growth depends on personality. People don't just show up for scores. They show up for drama, for connection, for characters. And Sophie Cunningham? She's got all of that. She's not afraid to get in people's faces. She's not afraid to call it like she sees it. And that's why fans ride for her. That's why social media had her back instantly. Because when you watch Sophie, you feel something. So when the league shuts that down, or worse, humiliates her for it, it sends a message. And that message is loud and clear. We want passion, just not too much. It's ironic, isn't it? In a league desperate for engagement, desperate for viral moments and bigger personalities, they're out here scolding one of the few players who's already delivering that exact thing. You couldn't write a more counterproductive script if you tried. And then there's the elephant in the arena, Caitlin Clark. Because let's be honest, if this had been her celebrating on the sidelines, smiling and shouting and cheering her team on, do you think anyone would have even flinched? Of course not. Security would have offered her a bottle of water and asked if she needed better sidelines. And that's not Caitlin's fault, but is the league's problem. Because favoritism like that, even the appearance of it, it erodes trust. Among fans, yes, but especially among players. It creates a two-tiered system, one for the faces of the league and one for everybody else. And if you think players don't notice that, you're fooling yourself. It's not about whether Clark gets protection. It's about whether that protection is being distributed fairly. It's about whether all players, regardless of image or brand or media value, get treated with the same dignity on and off the court. And this incident loudly suggested otherwise. The damage is already done. The clip went viral. The conversations are happening. Fans are asking hard questions. And the league, once again, is scrambling to explain why their version of player empowerment always seems to have a few conditions attached. So what happens now? Does the league issue a quiet oops and sweep it under the rug? Do they tighten the reins even more to avoid future outbursts? Or do they finally take a good, hard look at who they're protecting, who they're punishing, and what message that sends to players, fans, and future stars? Because moments like this, they echo. They tell young players, be careful how much fun you have. They tell veterans, you can lead, but don't get too loud about it. They tell fans, you can cheer, just don't cheer for the wrong personality. It's not sustainable. You want authenticity? Let players be real. You want drama? Let emotions show. You want loyalty? Treat all your stars like they matter, not just the ones with camera crews following them 24/7. And if the WNBA wants to grow, and truly deserves to grow, it needs to start holding itself to the same standard it holds its players to. Because right now, Sophie Cunningham is walking proof that being real might cost you your moment. And fans are watching, louder than ever. What happened to Sophie Cunningham was not just embarrassing, it was a warning shot. And not just to her, but to every player in the WNBA who dares to be loud, animated, emotional, or unapologetically themselves. Because the second that emotion doesn't fit the league script, the second your joy gets a little too real for TV, you're getting policed, literally and figuratively. Let's call it what it is, image management over integrity. Because when Sophie got shouted at for cheering, let's be clear, she wasn't storming the court. She wasn't starting fights. She wasn't cursing, taunting, or pulling some Dennis Rodman moment. She was doing what every invested teammate does in a high-stakes game. And the league came down on her like she was a liability. Why? Because in that moment, her enthusiasm didn't match the vibe the WNBA wants to promote. They want passion, so long as it photographs well. They want celebration, so long as it's coming from the right face. They want fire, so long as it burns politely. But Sophie? She doesn't do polite. She does present. And that's what makes her a lightning rod. And honestly, that's what makes her essential to this league. Because while the league scrambles to figure out what makes it marketable, the truth is staring them right in the face. Personality is currency. You want ratings? You want engagement? You want the casual viewer to become a diehard? You don't get that by manufacturing fake rivalries or sticking a mic in front of a media-trained rookie. You get that by letting players be people. And Sophie Cunningham, she's giving you everything. The fire, the flaws, the fight, the fandom. She's the girl next door and the one starting a fast break. She's a roller coaster in compression shorts. And that's what fans are here for. But apparently, being a walking storyline isn't enough if you don't fit into the league's little PR perfect boxes. And that's the part that stings. Because this is supposed to be the golden era. The WNBA is finally breaking into mainstream conversations. More eyes are on the game. Ratings are up. Players are landing major endorsement deals. The culture is shifting. But if the league keeps pulling stunts like this, they're going to fumble the whole bag. Because here's the thing. This wasn't just about Sophie. This was a red flag, a canary in the coal mine moment, a crack in the image that fans, players, and media are no longer ignoring. Because we've seen this movie before, leagues that rise fast but forget to nurture the foundation. They chase the headlines. They court controversy. They overcorrect. And eventually, they alienate the exact people who got them here. The authentic ones. The outspoken ones. The real ones. The Sophie Cunninghams of the world. And sure, there will always be golden children. The league has its favorites. And look, let's be honest. Caitlin Clark is a marketing dream. No one's mad at her for that. She's talented, she's a generational shooter, and she's drawing numbers that the league's been begging for since day one. But the issue isn't Caitlin. It's how the league handles everyone around Caitlin. Because when one player gets security, camera angles, curated narratives, and breathless praise for the exact same behavior that gets another player shouted at on live TV, that's not just bad optics. That's a systemic issue. It creates a two-tiered league. One where some players get celebrated for their emotions, and others get penalized for existing in the margins. And that's not just unfair. It's unsustainable. Because guess what? Sophie's not the only one watching. Other players? They're clocking this. Fans? Already dissecting it. Sponsors? Noticing it. And if the WNBA thinks it can play favorites in broad daylight and not face backlash in the era of viral receipts and hyper-engaged fandoms, they're in for a rude awakening. Because here's what fans want. It's not that deep. It's not revolutionary. They want fairness. They want consistency. They want players to feel safe to be themselves. They want to know that when they support a Sophie Cunningham, or an Eric Ogunbowl, or a Natasha Cloud, they're not backing players who are quietly being benched, fined, or side-eyed behind the curtain for not fitting a marketable mold. And they're not going to shut up about it either. Because now, every celebration will be scrutinized. Every sideline cheer will come with a stopwatch. Every smile might get measured for tone. And honestly, that's exhausting. For everyone. So here's the hard question. What does the WNBA actually stand for right now? Is it about elevating all players, or just the ones that check a few very specific boxes? Is it about growing the game, or gatekeeping who gets to grow within it? Because if the WNBA wants longevity, if it wants to matter in 5 years, 10 years, 50 years, it needs to start acting like a league that believes its own hype, that trusts its players, that trusts its fans. Because fans can tell when something's real, and they can smell when something's off. And this Sophie situation? Oh, it's off. So off, it's practically a case study in how to ruin a good thing. Let's just play it forward for a second. What happens if the league doesn't address this? If the apology never comes? If no one steps up and says, hey, this shouldn't have gone down like that? Then it festers. Then it turns into resentment. Quiet tension in locker rooms. Players second-guessing their emotions. Coaches wondering who's being watched. And worst of all, fans stop believing the league is on the side of the game. And when you lose that, you lose everything. Because you can have talent. You can have superstars. You can have viral clips and hot takes and buzzy rookie classes. But if people don't trust you, they won't stay. So here's a wild idea. Let Sophie celebrate. Let all of them celebrate. Let them be. Because the league is full of women who've clawed their way into the spotlight through injuries, through disrespect, through pay gaps, through international contracts and second jobs and constant criticism. And when they finally get a win, a moment, a taste of triumph, let them have it. Let them scream. Let them cry. Let them dance. Let them live. Because if the WNBA wants to become the league it's destined to be, it has to stop policing personality and start protecting it. It has to stop choosing optics over authenticity. It has to stop shouting down the very players who built this thing from the ground up. Sophie Cunningham got shouted at for being alive in the moment. But the league just told on itself. And we heard it loud and clear. So yeah, protect your stars. But make all of them feel like stars. Because right now, the ones who bleed for this league the hardest are starting to wonder if anyone's really watching when they shine. And that's the real danger. Because what happened to Sophie Cunningham wasn't just a bad moment. It was a revealing one. It peeled back the curtain and showed us something uncomfortable, that the WNBA, for all its progress, is still trying to figure out what kind of league it actually wants to be. Is it the gritty, unapologetic league built on blood, sweat, and loyalty from players like Sophie, who've been grinding for years, taking elbows to the face and playing overseas during the off-season just to stay in the game? Or is it the polished, brand-safe league that only shines the spotlight on acceptable personalities, the ones who fit cleanly into sponsorship decks, who toe the company line, who clap politely and smile in post-game interviews? Because you can't have both. Not forever. At some point, you have to choose authenticity or optics. And let's be real, this moment, that choice, it's already being made. Because think about the message that got sent when security screamed at Sophie Cunningham for cheering too hard. Not playing, not taunting, not violating any rule. Cheering, as an injured player, on the sideline, for her team's win. How do you explain that? How do you justify shouting down a player who's hyping her teammates, keeping morale high, staying connected despite being unable to physically contribute? I'll tell you how you don't. Because there's no good explanation. There's just silence. Awkward, telling silence. Which, by the way, is exactly what the league offered in response. No statement. No clarification. Just a blank void where accountability should have lived. And that, in a league that claims to stand for empowerment, that silence is louder than any security guard's bark. It tells players like Sophie that no matter how hard they work, no matter how much heart they bring, no matter how loyal they are, they can still be treated like a problem for simply being visible. And that hits deep, because Sophie Cunningham isn't just some player. She's a fan favorite, a spark plug, a personality who brings life to the court whether she's in the starting five or wearing a boot on the sideline. She's the kind of player fans remember, not because she's perfect, but because she's present. So when she got shouted at like a drunk fan trying to sneak onto the floor, it hit differently. It hit like a slap to every player who's ever been told they were too much, too loud, too confident, too passionate, too real. And it raised a very real, very uncomfortable question. What is the WNBA afraid of? Because if the league is so rattled by one woman cheering that it needs to send in security to neutralize the threat, maybe it's not the player who's the problem. Maybe it's the institution. Because you can't say we support women and then micromanage every emotion. You can't market empowerment and then silence it when it gets inconvenient. That's not support. That's control. And fans can see the difference. That's why the backlash wasn't just about Sophie. It was about what she represents. She's a stand-in for every athlete who's ever been told to be smaller, quieter, nicer, less them. And fans are over it. Because fans don't want step-forward athletes. They don't want carefully scripted post-game sound bites. They don't want polished perfection. They want to feel something. They want players who cry when they lose, who scream when they win, who trash talk, who joke, who live out loud. And when the league punishes that, it punishes the connection that makes sports matter in the first place. We don't fall in love with stats. We fall in love with stories. And Sophie's story? It's everything the league claims to value. She's battled injuries. She's been overlooked. She's been underestimated. But she shows up every single time with the same fire. She brings energy. She brings leadership. She brings joy. And for that, she got shouted at. And then she got silence. And that's where this becomes more than just a PR blunder. It becomes a culture problem. Because when the league chooses silence, it doesn't just ignore the incident. It endorses it. It tells every other security guard, every arena staffer, every executive watching, this is okay. This is how we handle emotion. It's a chilling message. And it begs the question, if this is how the league treats its own players in public, what's happening behind the scenes? What conversations are being had about managing personalities? What subtle pressures are being applied to tone it down? How many players are biting their tongues, adjusting their behavior, shrinking themselves just to avoid being the next Sophie? We may never know, but fans are starting to suspect. And that suspicion, it's poison to growth. Because you don't build a league on fear. You build it on trust. Trust that players can be themselves. Trust that the league will back them up. Trust that joy won't get you punished. And right now, that trust is breaking. But here's the kicker. Sophie? She's not playing the victim. She hasn't launched a smear campaign. She hasn't dragged the league. She hasn't even publicly made a fuss. Because that's the kind of pro she is. She keeps it moving. She keeps it focused. She lets her game and her presence speak for itself. But that doesn't mean we should move on. Because if the league doesn't fix this, if they don't address it, if they don't learn from it, we'll keep seeing moments like this. Again and again. Players censored, passion punished, energy erased, and eventually, the very thing that makes the WNBA special, its authenticity, its heart, its boldness, will get crushed under the weight of its own brand strategy. So this isn't just a Sophie problem. It's a future problem. What happens when the next wave of rookies, bright, expressive, dynamic, realize that being themselves might get them reprimanded? What happens when future stars stop trusting the league to protect them? What happens when the next celebration turns into the next controversy? That's the road we're on. Unless something changes, unless the league takes a step back and realizes this is not the image we want, unless they stop trying to sanitize players and start celebrating them as they are, unless they start protecting joy, not policing it. Because if they don't, they're not just shouting down Sophie Cunningham. They're shouting down everything the league could become. And that would be the real loss. So yeah, let her cheer, let her scream, let her stand up. Because we need players like Sophie. And more importantly, the league needs her too, whether they realize it or not.